for you to chat where you are calling in from and share if this is your first Pride event. So we can see in the chat where everyone is joining from, you know, from New York City, and it's not the first, from Anne Marie. Excellent. Julie Powers from Atlanta, Denver, woohoo, Laura. Eric from New Hampshire, Baltimore, Michelle Clark. Kaylan, welcome, Denver. And it's not the first. Boston, Austin, Texas, right on. Sasha, excellent. Wow, we have a lot of people joining. Welcome, welcome everyone to this first celebration. So we want to share with you a description of the JSI's LGBTQ plus work group, its members and its goals. And we will go through the history of LGBTQ plus Pride. And also we will have a great celebration together, which includes a big surprise. So to start us with this, I will pass it to Stuart Landers to share some of the opening remarks. Stuart.
Dustin, I believe you might be on mute.
Right. Okay. A lot of tech today. Thank you, Armand, and thank you for including me in today's event. I promise I will be brief. When I got to JSI, there was a gay and lesbian social group in the Boston office. Some of the folks were quite out in their daily life. Others, not quite so much. It was really a amiable group, and the potlucks were fun and frankly quite dishy. I had this notion that instead of gathering for fun and support, which is definitely valuable, we should also start to talk about LGBTQ health issues. Honestly, in the mid-late 1990s, there was not a field of LGBTQ plus health. There were very few publications on the topic, except for some dealing with mental health. There were no journals. There were no spiffy graduate programs at prestigious universities. And there were only two organizations that addressed LGBTQ health. One was the National Lesbian and Gay Health Association. They ran an annual conference and they folded in 1997 or 1998. And there was also the Gay and Lesbian Medical Association. That group is currently known as the Health Professionals Advancing LGBTQ Equality. But in the 80s and 90s, they were euphemistically known as the American Association of Physicians for Human Rights. It was a sort of underground time, let's say. JSI was part of a group that gathered in Washington, D.C. in 2000 to work on the first LGBTQ companion document to the Healthy People 2010 report. That's the report prepared once every 10 years by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services to set health goals for the nation. And that group really did a lot of LGBT health work. I will commit to do my best to help document that work so JSI's contributions aren't lost. And I know that work will be built upon by this group. While I always hate singling out people because I know I'll probably miss more people than I name, I do want to especially mention some of the folks who did this work over the years. Steve Wroblewski, John Mazzullo, Jody Sperber, Diane Perlmutter, Annie Sylvia, and Gary Fallis. And also people from that time who are a bridge to today, Terry Green, Julie Ray, and Marie Rakovic. I'm excited that this group forming has it right. It should never have been a choice between a social group and a business group. I can see already how this group will mesh fun activities as well as support for each other, advocacy within JSI and beyond, and an eye to building a robust LGBTQ set of projects. And all of that with a sensitivity and knowledge of how important intersectionality will be going forward, as none of us can or should abandon our multiple identities when we work together within this group. I know this group will be a tremendous success and become a permanent fixture within JSI's culture. Thank you. Have fun today.
Thank you very much, Stuart. So on the next slide, we want to share a little bit on, we want to highlight who is behind the scenes for this celebration as part of the LGBTQ plus working group. And we can see on these slides now that we have a lot of people. There you go. We have a lot of people that are from JSI, from JSI International, and some World Ed folks. And we hope to continue to grow after this presentation. So you may want to join. So feel free, if that is what you want to do, to join this work group, to reach out to any of these folks on your screen and any of these members and join our group. We will continue to discuss the structure and work together as we move forward. Now I'm gonna pass it to Hannah, who will talk about our goals as a group and also celebrating Pride while keeping in mind our equity lens. So Hannah, all yours.
Thank you, Armand, and thank you everyone for joining this very joyous celebration. We really appreciate it. So just quickly, my name is Hannah Blue. I am a consultant affiliated with the Denver office, but I reside in the Northwest region of New Mexico, near the homeland of the Navajo Nation. I will be sharing the goals of our work group, as well as considerations for how we can keep equity in mind as we celebrate Pride in each other. So I'll first talk about our goals. We want to provide resources to our group internally to JSI and then externally in the work that we do. And as Stuart mentioned, we hope to provide a supportive space within our group for discussions and community building. We want to also build on the foundation that JSI has established of supporting and engaging LGBTQ+ individuals. And we want to not just focus on the negative, but promote our passion for elevating the strength and resilience of our communities. We also acknowledge the need for building awareness, and this could be an area, building business, and this could be an area that we continue to grow into. And then finally, we always want to center and further health and racial equity, which I will talk a little bit more in terms of how we plan on doing that and how we are doing that, and then how you can do that through your work as well. Okay, so we want to think about how we work in this space, support each other, and continue the activism and the work that has been going on around this community and our individual staff members. So the movement, as we will hear a bit later, has been built on protest. And that's the history of the movement around activism. That's to combat ways that our identities have and continue to be criminalized and persecuted. So through DOMA, through sodomy laws, through adoption restrictions, freedom of religious act, different areas. And then we also want to address white supremacy influences in our spaces. So knowing that there hasn't been as much diversity and awareness of people of color within this space, which means unequal power structures and representation. We also want to really advance racial health and gender equity by uplifting individuals with intersectional identities. So knowing that there are tons of rainbow of diversity within our communities. And then ways that you can integrate LGBTQ+ individuals and communities into your projects by looking at that through assessment data, through community engagement, and thinking about the ways that different health topics affect our communities. We also want to think about the disproportionate burden, so focus on populations within this community that experience disparities. For example, within our communities, transgender, gender nonconforming, and other highly stigmatized groups bear disproportionate burden, and we'll hear about that a bit later as well. And then language is very important. So really paying attention to your language in terms of inclusion. So honoring names, pronouns, paying attention to gendered spaces, and just thinking about the ways that different phrases have gone into our society and the way that we explain things, and try to combat that as well. So a few more things. We want to amplify the stories of LGBTQ plus individuals, especially those with intersecting identities. So paying attention and elevating those with lived experience. And then let's talk about things other than sex. So don't just reduce LGBTQ plus folks to their sex practices and sexuality. We have many other aspects to our lives, as well as resiliency and things that we can contribute as well. And we're not a monolith, so there's strength and resilience in all of our communities, and there's differences as well in all of those areas. And then, you know, we are talking about literally love. Like when we talk about these communities, we're talking about love. And so it's important to engage in both the head and the heart work of equity when working with our communities. And then finally, continuing your learning journey by seeking opportunities to grow your knowledge, circle, and support. Thank you. I'll pass it over now to Victoria.
Thanks, Hannah. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about what LGBTQIA+ means. So I just want to point out that it's an evolving acronym, and it reflects the ongoing evolution of the community and the desire to be more inclusive of its culture and diversity. So you've likely heard many different variations of this acronym. There's not really a standard version, but some countries and cultures tend to use the ones that reflect their particular populations. And I do want to draw attention to the plus sign because it's important. It represents diversity of our community and underscores what Hannah was saying, the marginalization and underrepresentation of certain groups and subcultures that aren't reflected in the original and more popular LGBT acronym. So yeah, these letters have and continue to evolve for inclusion. And just one point of contention is that the use of ally in place of, or in addition to asexual or aromantic, and the use of queer in the acronym can sometimes be a little out of place. I know some people reject the use of the word queer because of its origins in hate speech, but yeah, this is just a little more about what that means, and that's it. Great. And so next, I'm just going to give a brief history of the pride flags. So the first pride flag here is the original. It was designed by Gilbert Baker in 1978 with the encouragement of Harvey Milk as a symbol of pride for the gay community. It has 8 stripes and each color has a specific meaning, which you can see on the slide. This flag became more popular after Harvey Milk was assassinated in 1978. However, due to issues with mass production and difficulty procuring the hot pink and turquoise dye for the original flag, it was revised in 1979 to the 6 colored stripes. Yep, that one. Right. And then in 2017, the city of Philadelphia added black and brown stripes to bring attention to people of color within the community. And then again in 2018, the flag was redesigned to include black and brown stripes representing BIPOC, and the blue and pink and white was added to represent the trans flag. You'll also notice that there's an arrow pointing to the right to show the forward movement. And that shows that there's still progress that needs to be done, and we're still moving forward. And then our most recent flag, which came out in 2021, is the Intersex Inclusive Progress Pride flag. And this flag includes a purple circle over a yellow triangle. And those colors were chosen by the intersex community as an intentional counterpoint to the blue and pink, which are traditionally seen as binary and gendered colors. Yeah, that's it for those. If you have any questions, feel free to pop it in, and I'll hand it off to Amy.
Can you hear me okay? Great. Hi, everyone. While we all love to see the rainbows and love throughout the month of June, Pride isn't just about the big parties, the huge elaborate floats, or the parades. Pride is rooted in activism, as Hannah already noted. It stems from the LGBTQ+ community fighting back against oppression. We're going to give you a high-level overview of some key moments in LGBTQ+ history leading up to the first Pride Parade. We encourage you to chat in any questions and reflections or add to the mural that Hannibal will go over in just a bit. Like so many histories, our history is expansive, so please take the time to also learn more on your own, from the literature to the arts to academics, cinema, and politics. The influence of our community runs deep. We're going to start first with the 1950s. Okay, sorry about that. A little delay over here. In 1952, the APA, which is the American Psychological Association, lists homosexuality as a sociopathic personality disturbance. That was in the first edition of the DSM. This is combated, and clinical perceptions change around this around 1956. So this led to reclassification as a sexual deviance in the 1968 second edition. But well before the 1950s, gay men and lesbians were said to be national security risks and communist sympathizers, which led to the call to remove them from state employment. It was thought that gay people were more susceptible to being manipulated, which could pose a threat to the country. So this lavender scare was the federal government's official response to both a visible lesbian and gay community and a perceived homosexual menace, which normalized persecution of gay men and lesbians through bureaucratic institutionalization of homophobic discrimination policy. Just as little facts, in 1953, in the final months of the Truman administration, it's reported that the State Department fired approximately 425 employees due to allegations of homosexuality. Later that year, President Eisenhower signs an executive order banning homosexuals from working for the federal government. The order lists homosexuals, again, as a security risk. This stayed partly in effect until 1995, when President Clinton rescinded the order partly, but put into place don't ask, don't tell. It was officially and fully repealed by President Obama then in 2017. So this time also marked several pre-Stone uprisings and activists, many of whom were queer, BIPOC, and trans activists rising up against police brutality. One such example is the Cooper Donuts uprising. Next slide. Thanks. So this took place in LA in 1959. A group of drag queens, trans folks, and sex workers took action against the LA Police Department for arresting their friends for simply congregating in Cooper's Donuts, which was a popular downtown LGBTQ+ meeting place. Cooper's Donuts, it was a 24-hour cafe. It was a well-known hangout for trans and gender diverse people. And LA law at that time dictated that if your gender presentation did not match the gender on your ID, you would be taken to jail. And LGBTQ+ people were subject to campaigns of entrapment, intimidation, and violence. LA was certainly not the only place that this happened, but that's the context for this uprising rather. Cooper Donuts, however, was well known for welcoming trans and gender diverse customers, drag queens, sex workers, and others who were not welcomed in other venues, and partly due to this visibility, Cooper's was subject to regular police brutality. There were rules that you must wear at least 3 items of clothing that match your legal gender. So these raids would often involve abusive gender checks, where a police officer would confirm a person's sex by putting their hand down their pants in full view of anyone present. The police attempted to arrest several patrons, including 2 drag queens, 2 male sex workers, and a gay man. As those arrested attempted to fight back, onlookers from Cooper Donuts decided enough was enough, and a group consisting of transgender women, lesbians, drag queens, and gay men spilled out into the street in support and threw coffee cups, donuts, and trash at the police until they are forced to retreat. Okay, next slide. So then we move to 1960s. While there were some victories in the 1960s, such as Illinois decriminalizing homosexuality, the LGBTQ+ community began fighting back against the relentless police brutality and discriminatory practices. This goes on and on throughout 1960s. There are so many examples of protests and uprisings during this time. I could go over more of them, but from the Black Cat Tavern, which is my backdrop, a picture of that uprising, to the Sip-In in Greenwich Village, this is another opportunity for you, for all of us and you, for learning. So Google's a great source. There's so many sources that we can share with you later about where you can find out about the small and larger uprisings leading to Stonewall. So of course, we have to talk about Stonewall. On a hot summer night in 1969, police raided the Stonewall Inn. It's a bar located on Christopher Street in Greenwich Village that served as a haven for the LGBTQ+ community. Bars and restaurants could get shut down just simply for having gay employees or serving gay patrons. Most gay bars and clubs in New York, though, at the time, including the Stonewall, were operated by the mafia. The mafia paid corrupt police officers to look the other way and often blackmailed wealthy gay patrons by threatening to out them. Police raids on gay bars were all too common, but on that particular night, members of the city's LGBTQ community decided to fight back, sparking an uprising that would launch a new era of resistance and revolution. Next slide, please. One of the most significant figures in the Stonewall uprising was Marsha P. Johnson. Marsha was an activist, self-identified drag queen, performer, and survivor. The P stood for Pay It No Mind, which is what she would say in response to questions about her gender. Next slide, please. So we have a video. Oh. Can anyone hear that?
Riots, Marsha threw a shot glass into a mirror at the bar after going to do. She was released. She was well known in New York's Greenwich Village, where she became an icon after the Stonewall riots.
I was one of the first girls to ever come in drag to the Stonewall. 1969, when the Stonewall riot started, that's when I started my rioting.
As one story recounts, during the riots, Marsha threw a shot glass into a mirror at the bar after police entered, shouting, "I got my civil rights." Marsha was a founding member of the Gay Liberation Front, and she formed STAR in 1970 with Sylvia Rivera, a transgender woman and activist. It was revolutionary in its direct support for the trans community. Together, they opened Star House, a shelter for homeless LGBTQ youth. She was also an advocate for those affected by HIV and AIDS, and rejected the stigma and shame associated with the virus.
I think you stand as close to them as you can, and help out as much as you can. Including myself, I have HIV.
She remained devoted to her Christian faith throughout her life.
Okay, next slide, please. So that brings us to the first, hard to segue from Marsha P. Johnson. That brings us to the, fast forward a year, that will bring us to the first Pride celebration in 1970. This was known as the Christopher Street Liberation Day March, which was commemorating the one-year anniversary of the Stonewall uprising. Next slide, please. So these are just some photos from the first parade and march. I highly recommend, there's a full video of the march with some interviews of the attendees in New York City. It's called Gay and Proud. You can find that on YouTube, just a quick plug for that one. Next slide, please. So 10 years after Stonewall, LGBTQ+ activists held the first March on Washington for lesbian and gay rights on October 14th, 1979. The march aimed to ban discrimination based on sexual orientation, urging current President Jimmy Carter to sign a bill to stop all discrimination against gays and lesbians in the military, federal jobs, and demanding Congress include sexual orientation in the Civil Rights Act of 1954. Marchers also insisted on a repeal of anti-gay legislation and the addition of family protection laws that would allow gay and lesbian parents to receive fair custody trials, so much of which is still under debate today. Note here that this demonstration and the platform, like many before and after, did not address issues for the trans community. Important, before we move on to the video, Bayard Rustin, was an out Black gay man and the deputy director of the historic 1963 March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. His activism, along with the civil rights movement, has served as the foundation for LGBTQ+ activism, including this 1979 March on Washington. The video we're going to show you is the audio for Audre Lorde's speech from the march.
30 years ago, the first time I came to Washington, my family and I couldn't eat ice cream in a drugstore here because we were Black. Now, since then, I have come to Washington many times to demonstrate and to testify to different aspects of myself and my beliefs. And I see many familiar faces from those past marches here today. For lesbians and gay men have always been in the vanguard of struggles for liberation and justice in this country and within our communities. The first National Conference of Third World Lesbians and Gay Men met in Washington over the past 4 days, and it was an outstanding success. We had Third World lesbians and gay men as delegates from over 40 states, Third World lesbians and gay men from Mexico, from Canada, and from England. Now, we have all come together to demonstrate our power as lesbians and gay men in behalf of our own rights. And this is the beginning of a new front, for we are saying to the world that the struggle of lesbians and gay men is a real and particular and inseparable part of the struggle of all oppressed people within this country. I am proud to raise my voice here this day as a Black, lesbian, feminist, committed to struggle for a world where all our children can grow free from the diseases of racism, of sexism, of classism, and of homophobia. For those oppressions are inseparable. The question always is, what kind of a world do we want to be a part of? And affirmation and work does not stop with this march on Washington. Each of us has a responsibility to take this struggle back to her and his community, translated into daily action. The National Conference of Third World Lesbians and Gay Men and this march today were once only visions of what could be. Now all of us have made it our reality. Let us carry this solidarity that we are professing here today back with us into our everyday lives, tomorrow and the day after and next week and next year. And let it be reflected in a renewed commitment to struggle for a future where we can all flourish, for not one of us will ever be free until we are all free.
Okay, we can move forward. So now we're into the 1980s and 90s. This is definitely my era. By 1980, Pride parades had taken place around the world in cities like Montreal, London, Mexico City, and Sydney. But as that decade got underway, the tone of the events shifted as the tragedies of the AIDS crisis became central to actions and demonstrations. The 1990s saw greater media visibility for LGBTQ+ people in public life, leading to more businesses starting to come on board for Pride participation. While the Stonewall anniversary had long provided the timing for annual Pride events, President Bill Clinton issued a proclamation in 1999 that every June would be Gay and Lesbian Pride Month in the US. President Barack Obama broadened the definition in 2008 when he issued a proclamation that the month of June be commemorated as Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, and Transgender Pride Month. So we've thrown a lot of information at you, so we're going to take a break from the history and come back to present for a moment. I'd like to pass it back to Hannibal, who will share our Pride mural.
Hi, everyone. So as Amy said, we're going to take a pause here and we want to hear from you. So as part of our event, we put together a mural, which is a space for you to share in the celebration. If you are not familiar with mural, I'm going to do a very quick demo in order to orient you to the space. You can also follow along with the demo using the instruction sheet that was sent out. And if someone could chat out the instruction sheet, that would be great. Also, if you're having trouble opening this document, please send a chat to Amy Black, and she will be able to make sure that you are able to get in. So you also received this in an email that was sent out a few days ago. Please don't jump into the mural just yet. We will have a lot of people in it, and it may lag due to the amount of activity. There'll be some time later in the event, and then after this tutorial for you to go in, explore, and add to the mural. All right, I'm going to share my screen. And, okay. Can you all see that? Okay. So here's our mural space. I want to give a shout out to Shannon Spurlock for coming up with the idea for the Rainbow Lotus, and to her partner for designing our graphic. You can already see that there's a lot going on here. There's a lot to look at and experience. I'm going to go a bit out of order from the instructions and start with navigating the mural space. So right now, everything looks pretty small, right? But you can zoom in on spaces and specific elements. And there are a couple ways that you can zoom in. If you're using a mouse, you can roll your scroll wheel. You can see mine's a little funky. In and out, or up and down in order to zoom in and out. If you're using a trackpad, just use 2 fingers on the trackpad and then move them up and down in order to zoom in and out. What's great about both of these options is that wherever your mouse is, you will be able to zoom in on that spot. So you move it around and zoom in over here. Another way to navigate around the mural is by using the map. So you'll see in the bottom or the lower corner of your screen, if you hover over it, it gets a little bit darker because it's kind of hard to see until you hover over it. The map has a few features. So above the map, you'll see a plus and a minus sign that also allows you to zoom in and zoom out. And then another feature is that this is a map of the whole space. You can use this and move it around. And that can also allow you to move within the space. You can click anywhere on the space as well to bring your little window pane there. Another way to move is just to place your cursor anywhere that is on the mural space and drag it around. So you just point, click, and then drag. Another way to see sections of the space is by accessing the outline. So this is the upper right-hand corner of your screen. You should see a little bullet pointed looking list icon. You click that, and then there's a bunch of different spaces here that you can zoom into. So say we want to see all the quotes, you click on quotes and it'll zoom right into the quote section. Same thing with photos. The last option is a home screen, so it'll bring you back out to see the whole picture. So now let's talk about adding content. You can add all kinds of elements, and you can add them within the Lotus, but you can also add them all around the whole space. So please feel free to use this whole canvas as your space. So the toolbar on the left side of your screen has several options of items to add. So this is the toolbar right here. But let's start with sticky notes. That is the little icon that looks like a sticky note. When you click on it, you'll be able to add a title, a text box, a comment, or different sticky notes. And you can either click on them and it adds it, and right now I'm zoomed out, so it adds it very tiny. So you'll see it added right here, very tiny. But I'm gonna zoom in on it using my trackpad, okay? I'm going to delete it. Or you can grab one of the sticky notes and just move it over to the space. And you can move it to wherever you want. The next, so that is the sticky toolbar. The next toolbar are shapes and connectors. And these are just exactly what they sound. You can add shapes. So again, very similar to the sticky notes. You can click on them, or you can drag them and place them here. With the shapes and the sticky notes, once you add it, you just need to start typing. So just start typing in order to add text to it. For connectors, you are able to connect different aspects or elements. Sorry about that, my dog. She wants to join in on the celebration. Bella, Bella. Okay. So you can you can click on the connectors, and then you'll see your little kind of cross right here, and you click on an element, and then you connect it to another one. So then that just is able to show you some relationships between things. And then you can edit the connector using arrows, colors, things like that. Okay, so another easy way to add sticky notes is just to double click anywhere in the space. So you just double click there and it automatically added a sticky note. Again, you can just type into it and you're ready to go. You can also copy sticky notes. So you can Control C, Control V, copy and paste your sticky notes. And then the same thing for any icons or elements, you can do that as well. So the next one in the toolbar is your icons. There is an extensive library of icons here. So you can just scroll down and peruse your icons, or you can type in, so say we want something related to a bunch come up. Actually, let's put a rainbow. So a whole bunch of rainbows come up. And then you can click on it to add it to the space, or you can grab it and plop it down where you want it to go in the mural. Okay, so then if you go to the picture icon, which is looks like a picture on the left, says images, you can search for images from like their database, or you can import images, and it brings up this option to import from your computer, your Drive, your Dropbox, your OneDrive, etc. You can also drag and drop from your computer or other areas, other like files or folders, and just drop right into the mural space. Okay, and then you can add comments. So come over here. Oh, I think Anne-Marie had a comment on here, but you can right click on any element and then select the option that says add a comment. And your comment box comes up here and you can say, this is a great picture, and send. And then you can see this one that comes up, it shows that there's a comment. You click out of it, it doesn't show it, but when you click on the one, it shows the comment. Okay, so once you've added different elements, you can format them by selecting an option. Oh, awesome, thanks, Anne-Marie. You can format different things, different elements. So if you click on it, you'll see this bar come up above it. You can decrease your font size, increase your font size. You can change the font. You can change the color. You can add links to it. So then when you click on it, it allows you to click on it and take you to an external link. And this by dragging it. Actually, one thing I wanted to point out is that there are instructions in the bottom left. All the instructions are here. If you want to peruse these as well when you're in the space. And then you can also grab any of these icons. It's like a little icon bucket, and just drag them and put them next to anything that you want to add a reaction to, add a heart next to, things like that. Or you can add your own icon. Okay, so now that you're an expert, feel free to go into the mural and explore as well as add to it. We do ask that if you're an ally, please honor and support the elements of those people who are sharing their stories, their pictures, their poems, and other items. If you're having trouble with mural or otherwise cannot access it, you can send myself or Armand a message via chat or email, and we will add it for you. The other thing I want to mention is once you click on the mural link, you will be able to enter into the mural space as a visitor, either by adding your name or anonymously. Do whichever one feels right for you. We will now chat out the link to the mural, and then we will have some time later on in order to explore the mural space and add to it. Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to stop my share. And go into the next slide. So thank you. We hope that you partake in that and that you have some fun looking at all the things that people added and that you add to them as well. So it's a space that you can continue to add to as we go on. Awesome. Okay, so I think, do you want me to share my screen, Armand? I can continue showing my screen. Sorry about that. Oh, Jamal has. Okay, thanks, Jamal. So if you go back, I think 2 slides. Thank you. So we did want to just provide a really quick introduction to Native American LGBTQ+ and Two-Spirit identities. There is so much that I could cover here, so much to learn about this, but I'm just going to give some highlights and then share some resources where you can learn some more. So this is why, as well as other reasons, why the plus in LGBTQ+ is so important, because there's so many different identities, so many different ways to describe yourself, your orientation, your gender, etc. So one thing to note is that Two-Spirit is not a sexual orientation, but a gender identity. This can implicate sexuality and how it's viewed in Western frame, but it's not specific to sexuality. It can also implicate pronouns. And so there are some pronouns in Native languages that are outside of the binary of she and he. So Two-Spirit is a pan-Indian term, but it's not a universal identity. And so it's something that folks kind of came together and agreed upon within a certain group of people who coined that phrase in the 90s. And it's widely used, but it's not an identity that everyone assumes for themselves. So there are also different terms in different languages and communities that describe Two-Spirit folks. And then the usage of Two-Spirit can depend on the context. So some people may use it in one context, but may not use it in another. It also evokes a very specific cultural identity, connection, traditions, and acceptance. So using it really doesn't just implicate, Native and gender identity. It's also a lot bigger than that in terms of roles, in terms of culture, in terms of tradition, and other areas. And then there are nuances around terms and identities in each Native community. So this can be different across all communities. And then recently, there's been some discussion about another group coming together and revisiting and updating this term. And so, if you go to the next slide. Here are just a couple of resources. There's a ton. So the one on the left is a toolkit from the Northwest Portland Area and Health Board in terms of supporting Native, Two-Spirit, LGBTQ+ individuals and youth, particularly for their healthcare providers. And on the right is a documentary on PBS that looks at an incident, a hate crime that took place against a Native LGBTQ Two-Spirit individual in the Four Corners area where I live. And so if you want to check that out, it's a really good documentary that also explores the identities and some stories of individuals. So thank you. I will now pass it back to Amy.
Thanks, Hannah. That was great. So ball culture emerged in the 1920s in and around New York City. At their beginning, performers consisted mainly of white men putting on drag fashion shows. Black queens rarely participated, and when they did, they were expected to lighten their faces. So fed up with the racist culture, the queer black ball community established their own underground ball culture in the 1960s. So we're going back a little bit. We're going to speed up as well. So ball culture in the 1960s contained very few categories, with primarily queens portraying Las Vegas showgirls. However, Stonewall, when queer people of color stood up to police, changed self-perceptions and led to feelings of self-acceptance and power. The 1970s saw an expansion of ball participation as balls increased their numbers and types of categories to allow inclusivity and involvement of everyone. Balls became a safe space for queer youth of color, mainly Blacks and Latinas, to express themselves freely. This story is so beautifully shown in the 1990 documentary, Paris is Burning. And we'll show you a clip now.
Gay people, men gather together under one roof and decide to have competition amongst themselves. Balls.
I went to a ball, I got a trophy, and now everybody wants to know me.
This movie is about the ball circuit and the gay people that's involved in it and how each person's life brought them to this circuit.
It's like crossing into the Looking Glass in Wonderland. You go in there and you feel 100% right as being gay. And that's not what it's like in the world. It's not what it's like in the world. It's not what it's like in the world. You know, it should be like that in the world.
The society, going to a football game, basketball, that's their entertainment. Yeah. You know, a ball is ours. We prepare for a ball. We may spend more time preparing for a ball than anybody would spend preparing for anything else.
Exactly.
You know, a ball is like our world, you know.
Balls to us is as close to reality as we're going to get to all of that fame and fortune and stardom and spotlight.
Voguing came from
Sorry that couldn't get louder. We'll send it out so you all can watch it. You should just watch the whole movie. It's really wonderful. So we can go on to the next slide. So just like we want to honor the ball culture, we wanted to take a little more time to honor the legacy of so many who came before us, many of whom have all but been erased from our history. As I'm chatting and telling the stories of these women, please feel free to add in others that you know of, that have inspired you, and that would be great to share that knowledge with us. So the first woman we're going to tell you about is Stormy DeLaveray, was a Black butch lesbian who was active in the ball culture of New York City. She performed in the first racially integrated drag review in the US as the group's only drag king, and is famous for her role in the Stonewall uprising. According to many, including herself, she threw the first punch at Stonewall and was the catalyst for sparking the rebellion. She passed away at age 93 in 2014 and is referred to as a, quote, gay superhero in the New York Times obituary. You can click on the video, Jamal.
More about what life is about than most people.
Who's Stormy? I'm a human being that survived. I've helped other people survive.
Stormy DeLaveray was born to a wealthy white father and a Black mother in New Orleans, Christmas Eve, 1920, caught between two worlds from the day she was born. Her father had her privately educated while her grandfather raised her.
Well, he finally told me, because everybody, the white kids were beating me up, the black kids were beating me, everybody was jumping on me. If it wasn't because of my father's money, it was because of being black, being a Negro with a white face. Yeah. So he told me if I didn't stop running, I'd be running the rest of my life. And when I was 15, I stopped running, and I haven't run a day since.
After leaving home, Stormy sang with jazz bands across the country, developing the silvery baritone that would serve her well in her next incarnation.
So I tried to do the proper thing, you know, wear men's clothes on stage and wear women's clothes on the street. I got picked up twice for being a drag queen. Well, the guy that arrested me once for being a drag queen came in the club and he said, you don't know how to tie. I said, well, if I'm not tying my tie right, why don't you come in every night and show me how I'm supposed to tie? And he did. To this day, I can tie a bow tie with even looking in the mirror, and it'll be perfect. And he was always laughing. He was a nice man. He was only doing his job, you know.
In 1955, Stormy became the one girl in the Jewel Box Revue, a traveling musical show of gender deception. While her girlfriend watched from the wings, Stormy would now perform as a man.
Somebody told me that I couldn't do it and that I would completely ruin my reputation and that people did not have enough problems being black. I said, I didn't have any problem with it. Everybody else did.
She made a very handsome man. It worked for her.
In June of 1969 in New York City, Stormy found herself at the epicenter of the Stonewall riots. If there was a friend in need, Stormy would be there.
That was no riot. Everybody says a riot. It was a disobedience, and they started fighting back. It was a rebellion. And once they got the hang of it, they rebelled.
Okay. So let's move on. I'm in the interest of time. Brenda Howard was a bisexual activist who is widely credited as having created the first Pride Parade and is known as the, quote, mother of Pride. She helped coordinate the Christopher Street Liberation Day March in honor of the 1-year anniversary of Stonewall. Ruth Ellis, born in 1899 to parents who were enslaved, she was considered one of the oldest living out lesbian until she died at 101 in 2000. Ruth was a fierce activist for civil rights. She came out at 16 in 1915. And in 1936, met her partner of 34 years. Together, they turned their home into, quote, the gay spot, a place where young Black gay men and lesbians who were denied access to both white gay clubs and Black straight clubs, a place where they could congregate and seek refuge. Sylvia Rivera was a Puerto Rican American transgender activist who helped lead the charge on the night of Stonewall. She was also a founding member of both the Gay Liberation Front in New York City. Along with her friend, Marsha P. Johnson, she also helped found STAR, a group dedicated to helping homeless trans youth. Like Martha, she became part of and helped found the gay rights movement. During a time where transgender folks were not particularly welcomed, an issue she famously challenged in her, quote, y'all better quiet down speech at the 1973 Christopher Street Liberation Day rally. It's powerful and raw, and I encourage you to listen to it. There is some pretty harsh language in there that is necessary, but we just couldn't show it for this celebration. And finally, Audre Lorde, who we heard from earlier, was a self-described Black lesbian mother, warrior, poet. Both her activism and her published work speak to the importance of struggle for liberation through a lens of intersectionality. An internationally recognized activist and artist, Audre Lorde was the recipient of many honors and awards, including the mantle of New York State Poet for 1991 through 1993. She also founded Kitchen Table Press with Barbara Smith. There are so many others not shown here, but I wanted to give a shout out to Miss Major Griffin Gracie, otherwise known as Miss Major. She's a veteran of the Stonewall Uprising and a fierce force to be reckoned with. That's your homework from me for today, and I'll pass it back to, oops, nope, not gonna pass it back. I'm keeping it, sorry about that. Next, please. So why are we still fighting? Why do we still need activism? The LGBTQ community is one bonded against oppression and the fight for equality. And while we celebrate our victories and resiliency, we still have work to do. So I'm going to give you a few examples, but we encourage you to add in the chat ways in which you know LGBTQ plus individuals are discriminated against every day. And also, we'd like you to reflect on what you can do in your work and your life to address equality for the LGBTQ plus community. So as we've talked about, transgender folks are still being discriminated against out of spaces where their voices are critical. Members of the transgender community lack legal protection, are subject to higher rates of homelessness and poverty, violence, harassment, and a lack of healthcare access and coverage. Unfortunately, the numbers of trans violence tracked since 2013 from the Human Rights Campaign shown that 2020 saw the most recorded deaths of transgender and gender nonconforming people, which was 44. And already 2021 has seen 29 reported murders. So many of these murders go unreported. So that is at least 29. And as Hannah noted, we cannot celebrate Pride outside of the context of intersectionality. BIPOC members of the LGBTQ plus community, particularly trans folks, disproportionately experience, as I said, violence, homelessness, and incarceration. And to add on top of that, have been consistently marginalized within the LGBTQ plus community. As an example, just recently, queer BIPOC activists organized an alternative Pride March in Boston and have been asking for changes from Boston Pride for years. In 2015, Black Lives Matter demanded the organization diversify the board, allow BIPOC activists control of Black and Latino Pride events, and re-examine corporate sponsorships, among other things. And finally, it is still a battle to pass the Equality Act and is currently held up in the Senate. This is basically the same act that was on the platform for the 1979 March on Washington. This comprehensive legislation to expand federal civil rights laws to protect LGBTQ plus people from discrimination in employment, housing, credit, jury service, and federally funded programs, such as those for health and education, as well as simply public places and spaces. LGBTQ plus Americans still lack full discrimination protections in 29 states. So now we're going to move on, but as we move on, please continue to reflect on how you can do this work. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Amy. And first off, I apologize for keeping my video off. I'm getting the classic unstable internet message, so thought maybe this would help. So we're just going to go into considerations for allyship and activism. And I know a lot of the topics we've brought up today are a bit heavy. So we just thought we'd share this fun video so we can, wrap things up with a bit of a smile. So.
The boss is back, baby.
This Friday.
The difference in try and triumph is just.
It's Friday again. We're so sunburned and mad. And we love it. $50 drinks that are bad. Well, we missed it.
I'm overwhelmed, but I love.
We're just happy that we're queer and can do this every year.
Wait, are we on the Deutsche Bank floats?
It's Friday again.
You can go to the next slide. Yeah, so that sort of touches on our first bullet point here, which is beware of corporate rainbow washing. So you may have seen during Pride Month, all of these companies come out with rainbow logos and tons of Pride merch, but their money really isn't where their marketing is. At the same time, they're giving money to conservative, well, I don't want to say conservative, but anti-LGBT plus organizations and policies. And, I think an easy way to sum up all of this, being an ally in any circumstance, is to follow 4 R's, which are reaction. So when someone comes out to you, let them know that you're happy and ready to listen. Respect their confidence in telling you about their identity and their choice to tell you. Research, it's okay to not understand things, but it's not the job of the person coming out to you to educate you. You should always be committed to continuously learning about sexual and gender identity, discrimination, and the history. And finally, requests. So with coming out, sometimes there are requests for appropriate pronouns or a new name, and it's important to honor that and practice this and correct yourself and others even when that person isn't around. And I just want to point out again that allyship isn't exclusive to our straight or heterosexual colleagues. There's also allyship in the LGBTQ plus community. There's a need for all of us to continue working towards inclusion and diversity. And we all need to come together and fight back against transphobia, racism, ableism, and other pervasive issues that affect us all. So yeah, if you just want to reflect on these bullet points.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much to all the panelists who presented today. Great information. And now, before our big surprise, we're going to open it for any other questions that you may want to ask at this moment about what is happening within JSI, what is happening outside in the world as we're closing June and celebrating Pride, or any additional discussions or address anything that we might have missed during this celebration. So please unmute your microphones or chat your questions, and we will be happy to address some of them. And we have seen some of the many comments that we have received. Really hard to keep track of them, but we are paying attention to all of them. So let me just take a minute to see the chat to see where we are at. One of the things that one of the questions that we're asked is to present a little more information of what has happened at JSI through all these times. And even though we really encourage the chatting feature, this is a great opportunity to put in the mural that was put together by the team on what has happened at JSI, the progress that we have seen, the successes that we have seen, even the lessons learned. You know, I don't want to call them mistakes, but the mistakes and what we have learned from all those situations that have happened at JSI and how we have grown through all this time. I want to open it to Amy, Victoria, Hannah. Is there anything that you would like to add to any of the comments that you have seen and read so far?
I think it's great what Natalie just put in terms of parents, custody, even family planning. I'm recently joined the RHNTC, and we're looking at ways to ensure that family planning and discussions around sexual reproductive health are inclusive of LGBTQ plus folks. And so really just keeping, being aware and considering how any of your projects, you know, affect LGBTQ plus individuals, and then thinking about those laws and policies that may disproportionately burden or affect families. And I love Caitlin's suggestion about her advocacy work and continuing to, you know, continuing that. And if there's any resources that you have, Caitlin, to share around how you reach out and do that, that would be great. Yeah, thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, Hannah.
I also like to see Erin's idea of so critically important is to, I know I lost your point there, Erin, that we can collect local, wherever we are, LGBTQ plus vendors to buy merchandise for, otherwise support on the micro level. I think this is really important. I think the piece of rainbow washing is, should not be understated. I mean, to have, it's been quite a, the corporate sponsorships are one thing in terms of visibility, but right now with so many local organizations struggling with funding, that, you know, understanding how we can support them. I think we've seen that even trying to pursue business development opportunities for LGBTQ plus health have been hard based on how much funding is available for such initiatives. So I really appreciate that comment, Erin.
Victor, is there anything you would like to add to this?
No, I just really appreciate everyone coming and listening, you know, giving us their time. It's nice.
Thank you very much. And as the only thing that I would like to add to all of this is that I know that JSI is making some internal changes to have some inclusivity, especially for what both, actually the three of you have mentioned, that some of the trans folks that we have worked with have remained invisible and not addressed, and they don't have the same opportunities that we all have. And I know for a fact that JSI is making those changes to have some inclusivity, especially when it comes to equity among transgender individuals, and to open that opportunity for transgender individuals to work at JSI and join us on those forces. So thank you very much, everyone. Now I'm gonna pass it to Jamal.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Armand. So we have a special performance from a former JSI. He's still around somewhat, but nevertheless, he has made his way to the pageantry world. And so we get to preview his new persona. She goes by the name of Kelly Cassadine. So she is going to perform for us, has submitted a performance for us, I should say, of a classic that we all know and love. Anybody who loves Tina Turner is an amazing person, because I love Tina Turner too. So she's going to perform Proud Mary for us. So give me a second while I cue that up.
Happy Pride, JSI, from Kelly Cassadine.
Awesome, awesome. That was truly amazing. What a way to end this celebration. So thank you very much, Amy. Thank you very much, Stuart. Thank you very much, Hannibal and Victoria, and our amazing performer, and each one of you for your attention and your support to the LGBTQ plus JSI community. So please join our groups, email any of us or any of the people that we showed on your slide earlier. And if you want to join us, join us. We still have a lot of work to do. But thank you, thank you, thank you, everyone. And happy Pride, JSI.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Happy Pride. Show us your colors. Where's your colors? I don't know if you can see my earrings.
I know my earrings too. Yay!
Happy Pride.
Add to the
my, my bracelet too. Julie, where are you? Show us your pride.
Love is love, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Happy Pride, everyone.
Bye.